Just imagine a life of luxury, a millionaire father, and 5 sisters who are simply the most desired girls in school. Sounds like a dream, right? But then, out of nowhere, the father drops the bomb. No one there is a blood relative. They were all adopted. And to make things worse, or better, depending on the point of view, some of those ex-sisters take the chance to confess that they've always had a crush on you. Yep, this is the crazy story of our protagonist, Arata. The anime begins by showing an elite neighborhood in Tokyo, focusing on an absurd mansion that belongs to a successful businessman. That's where 7 siblings live together, surrounded by employees who keep everything spotless. Among this crew, we have Arata and Shion, the only 2 boys in the house. Arata, kind of lost in the world of romance, turns to Shion and asks the classic question, "How do you get a girlfriend, man?" Shion, who's more experienced, laughs and says, Arata just needs to have a silver tongue. Then he brings up the girl Arata was interested in, and Arata, all innocent, says he only told her she was pretty and nothing more. That's when Shion teases him, saying Arata is way too passive for someone who's the eldest son and heir of the powerful Zundi family. In his mind, Arata could choose any girl he wanted, but Arata defends himself, saying it's not about being slow. He still believes in destiny, as if a perfect girl would just appear in his life. At that moment, the 5 perfect sisters show up, and Uka immediately cuts the mood, asking what those 2 guys are gossiping about so early. In her view, that doesn't match the dignity expected of heirs of the Zungi family. Seiha joins in, saying that, actually boys' conversations are like 10% hobbies, 30% girls, and 60% sex. In other words, easy to guess what they were talking about. Minami, who never misses a chance, adds that now she finally understands boys. 80% of their conversations are about girls. Then Banri, considered the most gorgeous of all, corrects her sister, saying she exaggerated a bit. And the shy Kotono? Well, she just stays quiet in the middle of all the chaos. But Uka, never holding back, blurts out that Arata probably just wanted Shion to tell him all the juicy details about his relationship. After all, the younger brother has a girlfriend, and he doesn't. That leaves Arata totally embarrassed. And it gets worse when Shion reveals that Arata had been saying Uka already has a woman's body. Result, Uka orders her dog, Vei, to teach him a lesson. And man, the dog actually bites Arata's butt. They even tell the dog to rip his balls off because, according to her, he deserves it for being such a pervert. The other sisters laugh and say he deserved it for thinking dirty thoughts about them. Arata, all wrecked after the bite, gets up outraged, saying he'd never have such thoughts about his sisters. But Uka quickly counters, reminding him of something inappropriate he once did with Kotono. The others confirm that he almost got sent to the dreaded room number 8 because of it. Arata is left super awkward. Banri tries to ease the tension, saying it's normal for a virgin teenager like Arata to get caught up in these confusions, but the sisters don't forgive him, saying being a virgin doesn't give him a free pass to act like a creep. Seiha, always sticking to science, mentions that incest is a genetic bomb, and that if Arata really wanted to hook up with one of his sisters, their kids could be born all messed up. But then Banri, who already showed she has a mind way out of the box, says there are things in the human mind even science can't explain. She even throws some shade, saying maybe even Seiha has fallen in love before, leaving her sister blushing. Suddenly, Minami turns against everyone and asks them to stop. She even defends Arata, saying he's a nice and handsome guy. Arata, happy with the compliment, tries to hug her but gets punched instead. She was playing a fighting game and just wanted to test something out. Banri also defends Arata, saying he's a nice and handsome guy, and that the sisters should go easier on him since, from the very beginning of the anime, he's only been beaten up and humiliated. Then Uka asks if the 2 brothers are free on Saturday because there's going to be karaoke to celebrate Kotono's birthday. Shion replies that it's fine for him since his date is only on Sunday, and nobody even lets Arata answer because, well, nobody cares. But Minami is concerned and asks him. Arata says he had an appointment but can cancel to attend the birthday. It's pretty clear she's starting to see him differently, right? Those who are quiet always hide the most dangerous intentions. Anyway, the 7 agree to go together. On the scheduled day, they're all at the station waiting for the train. Meanwhile, some boys are admiring the girls, commenting on how beautiful they are, saying it's almost a miracle to see them all together. They even say they've already been invited to appear on TV. They also comment that Arata and Shion are lucky to live with such beauties. Upon arriving at school, Arata complains because he overheard the boys talking behind their backs. But Shion bluntly tells him that's normal, since people only look at appearances and don't see the chaos inside the house of the 7 siblings. Then Arata admits that those guys really have no idea what it's like growing up with 5 sisters hovering around, each just a year apart from the other. To him, they're always right, he's always wrong. Living in that environment feels like being in constant war. But since they're all gorgeous, outsiders can only imagine his life as a rom-com in harem format. That's when Shion gives his detailed analysis of each sister. Banri, the eldest. She's 18 already. In her first year at a top university, with a gentle aura that wins everyone over. She's loved by people of all ages, like a social magnet. The second is Seiha, 17, in her final year of high school. President of the science club, top grades in school, and she carries a cold, serious, elegant vibe. And of course, that makes her super popular too. Then comes Aoka, also 17, in her second year of high school. Smart, athletic, star of the track and swimming teams, and on top of that, the favorite to be the next student council president. A true, complete package. Minami, the fourth oldest, is 15, and in her first year of high school. She won the middle school tennis championship 3 years in a row, and has a tomboyish style that even girls love. Everyone bets she might become an Olympic athlete someday. And finally, the youngest of them all, Kotono, 14, in her last year of middle school. With her shy demeanor and delicate looks, she seems like she walked straight out of a romance anime. Always surrounded by fans, she's treated like a true treasure. Even with Shion's full analysis of the sisters, Arata drops the classic, "I can't see them any other way than as my sisters." But is that really true, Shion? Then asks what happened between him and Kotono. Arata replies that he had no choice but to reject her since she confessed she liked him. The tension rises when suddenly Arata runs into his childhood friend, and just seeing her makes his heart race. Shion doesn't hold back and teases him, says Arata has childhood traumas that made him all awkward with women, straight to the point. Later, lying in bed, Arata thinks about adding the girl he likes on social media, but ends up giving up because he doesn't see a good reason to send a request. At that moment, Uka walks into the room and sees her brother doing homework. She sits next to him, and Arata, sneaky or not, glances at her body and blurts out that she shouldn't be wearing such light clothes. But she replies casually, saying they're at home, that they even bathed together as kids, so she'll wear whatever she wants. She asks who the girl he's into is, and distracted, he lets it slip. Okoyama, the hottest girl he's ever seen. Coincidence of fate. Okoyama is in the same committee as her, so naturally she starts planning a meeting between them for the weekend. But Arata immediately cuts her off, saying he doesn't need her help, that he has his own way of doing things. That leaves Uka a bit irritated since she just wanted to help. After all, he's the heir of the family. Meanwhile, in her room, Kotono is looking at a picture of Arata with the face of someone completely in love. The next day after class, Arata walks alone, wondering what his life would be like if he didn't have those 5 sisters. He sees his childhood friend with a new boyfriend and wonders if he'll ever be able to find someone too. Later at night, all the siblings are called for an important family meeting organized by their father. On the way, Arata bumps into Uka, who compliments the suit he's wearing. He goes down to the mansion's main floor and finds the table set with everyone gathered. But before any toast or dinner, Uka starts an argument with Minami because she lost her borrowed headphones. The fight escalates, and Arata, as the oldest brother, tries to calm things down, reminding them they are a family and should act like one. Then their father appears and says he needs to tell them something important before they start eating. He says he wanted to reveal this on Kotono's 15th birthday, but now feels it's the right time. And he adds that no matter what he's about to reveal, his love for each of them remains the same before dropping. They are not real siblings. They were all adopted. He reveals that he had promised Cyril that he would tell them when Kotono turned 15. And he also says that, except for Minami and Shion, who are blood twins, no one there shares biological ties. The atmosphere grows heavy. The father apologizes for keeping it a secret for so long and says that from now on, he will only tell the truth. The maid comes in to serve dinner, but no one seems to believe what they've just heard. Later, they all drink some tea to try to digest the revelation. They start talking, and Uka says she feels betrayed for having been deceived all this time. The environment becomes tense. Minami tries to lighten the mood, cracking a joke to ease the pressure. Since Banri is the oldest and the first to have been adopted, everyone asks if she remembers anything about the adoption process. She thinks for a moment, seems to know something, but ends up saying that even without blood ties, everyone there is and will always be siblings to her. With that, the conversation ends, and each one goes to their room. But Arata's head won't stop spinning. After all, he just discovered that the people he grew up with for over 15 years have no blood relation to him. They are technically strangers. Trying to clear his mind after the bomb he just received, Arata decides to take a bath to calm down. On the way to the bathroom, he sees some women's clothes hanging, probably one of his sisters. But he thinks, we grew up together. We're old enough to deal with this just fine. So he goes into the bathroom anyway, But as soon as he opens the door, he gets a huge scare. Kotono is inside. She's startled too, quickly covers herself, but strangely doesn't tell him to leave. On the contrary, with that shy demeanor, she asks him to wash her back, like he always used to do when they were younger. Arata, even embarrassed, helps and jokes that if their classmates found out she still doesn't know how to wash her own back, they would laugh a lot. Kotono feels embarrassed but also happy. After all, she really likes him. Meanwhile, in the kitchen, Uka and Shion are talking about Kotono. They're both worried about the fact that she learned everything about the adoption right on her birthday, just when she should be focusing on entrance exams. Uka asks what Shion thinks about all that, and of course he takes the chance to tease her, asking why she cares so much about Arata's opinion. Uka, visibly emotional, says it's because they lived 16 years believing they were twins. To her, Arata has always been like her other half. Shion replies that everything is fine with Arata, that he will continue being the heir of the family, the eldest brother of all. But he also warns that now society might start looking at them differently. After all, without blood ties, theoretically, they could even marry each other. And it's at this exact moment that chaos begins. Kotono, back in the bath, grabs Arata from behind. Meanwhile, in the living room, Uka and Shion continue arguing. Uka says she's horrified by the possibility of something like that happening, but comments that technically there isn't a law in Japan that prohibits marriages between adoptive siblings since there's no blood connection. Shocked, she says she didn't expect to hear that kind of disgusting thought from her own brother. Shion tries to calm things down, saying he's just grateful to have a sister like her, beautiful and kind. But Uka reminds him that Arata has already made comments about the way she dresses at home, which only reinforces the idea that he's an incorrigible pervert. She takes the opportunity to ask about that mysterious day in the game room between Arata and Kotono. Apparently, they caught Arata on top of her, and only Shion knows what really happened. He says it's a secret, but Uka insists, and she herself answers that she knows Arata would never force anyone. They just like to mess with him. Then Shion reveals the truth. Kotono liked Arata. Uka is shocked and screams. Shion asks her to lower her voice and explains that, of course, Arata rejected her. But Kotono didn't take the no well and clung to him that day. He was only trying to shake her off when they were caught. Uka is surprised by her little sister. She always thought Kotono was the most innocent in the house, but admits that sometimes she has unexpected outbursts. Shion comments that Arata didn't tell anyone the truth to avoid hurting Kotono. After all, if it's true she's really in love, that complicates everything. Even without blood ties, they are still siblings in daily life. Meanwhile, in the bathroom, Kotono is still clinging to Arata. He's completely uncomfortable, and she, as if nothing were strange, hugs him tighter and confesses. She says she loves him with all her heart. Arata tries to pull away, scared by the situation, but she insists, saying she researched on the internet and found out that, according to Japanese law, adoptive siblings can marry. So technically, nothing is stopping them. Arata finally breaks free, still shocked, and sees Kotono's face full of tears. She asks if he thinks she's a bad girl now, but Arata answers gently. He says she's not bad, that many teenagers get confused about their own feelings, especially when they grow up so close to someone. And even if they don't share the same blood, he's still her older brother. And as such, what he wants most is to see her happy, even on the day she walks down the aisle to live her own story. He ends by saying he'll forget what happened there and asks her to finish her bath in peace. Kotono, frustrated and hurt, leaves grumbling, saying she wanted to be crushed. Yes, with those very words, complaining that Arata is too nice and at the same time annoying because deep down she hoped her confession would change something between them. Arata, with his mind fried, leaves the bathroom very quietly. But someone saw him coming out, and the way the scene looked, it seemed much more suspicious than it really was. The scene cuts abruptly to the father of the family, who is in his office when Banri walks in. Meanwhile, Arata still can't believe what just happened with Kotono. In his mind, it's all the parents' fault. If they hadn't told them they weren't real siblings, none of this would be happening. Even after everything that happened, Arata still couldn't erase the affection he felt for his sisters. As much as he knew they weren't tied by blood, he grew up with them, shared joys, fights, and memories. It was impossible to pretend all of that didn't exist. When he entered his room, he got startled. Seiha was sitting on his bed, as if it were her place. You know you're in the wrong room, right? And throwing yourself on someone else's bed like that isn't exactly polite, said Arata, frowning. Seiha, with her usual direct way, replied, If you've got something to hide, just lock the door. Where were you? The question caught Arata off guard. He froze for a second, trying not to show his nervousness. After all, he had just gone through an uncomfortable situation with Kotono and didn't want to raise more suspicion. Just walking around, taking a stroll, he tried to deflect. Seiha, no fool, noticed something strange in his words and changed the subject. Your room is the smallest in the house, but it has a charm. It even looks bigger than it is. She brought up an old memory. Remember when we were 10 and played rock, paper, scissors to decide the rooms? Uka won the biggest and you got the smallest. Good thing you're not the type to hoard stuff. Arata gave a forced laugh and joked, doing a tour of a boy's room now? Gonna start a live stream? I'm not really into lives, she replied without showing much emotion. Arata began to wonder what Seiha really wanted. As the second oldest in the house, she had always been the most centered. Maybe she wanted to talk about the father's revelation, but she didn't seem like the type of person to casually start that kind of conversation. Suddenly, Seiha came closer and lightly pushed Arata onto the bed, looking straight into his eyes. Stay quiet. This needs to be kept secret. Arata, surprised by her approach, was completely confused. In his mind, everything was turning upside down. He thought, what's happening with this house, with these girls? Seiha, who had always been reserved, was acting in a completely different way. Could she also have been influenced by the conversation with Kotono? Relax, nothing serious is happening here, said Seiha as if reading his thoughts. That's when she dropped it. I saw you two in the bathroom, you and Kotono. Arata was shocked. How much did you see? Enough. I was going to take a bath and heard you talking. The wall isn't that thick. Arata backed away, afraid of what that might mean, but Seiha reassured him. I had already noticed Kotono was confused. Sometimes too much affection can be mistaken for something else, especially in adolescence. I'm not here to judge, she continued. And honestly, I think you handled it in the best way. But if this happens again, how will we know you'll act the right way? Arata understood she was testing him, not out of malice, but to make sure her sisters would be safe. You couldn't think of a less weird way to do this? He asked, still annoyed. It was the most direct method. I don't have any feelings for you, so it was neutral for me, Seiha replied as if she were talking about an equation. Are you crazy, Seiha? Seriously? She, impassive, started to ramble about culture and laws. Marriage between siblings is prohibited by law in Japan, but that has more to do with tradition than biology. Science says children of parents with greater genetic diversity are healthier. That's why, to avoid any wrong ideas, we need to make it clear that this kind of relationship must not happen here in any way. Arata felt uncomfortable with that weird speech. She continued, even so, I know Kotono is still young and might not fully understand the gravity of this, but we need to be clear, talk openly with her without fear, until she understands. Arata replied, that doesn't justify what you just did. But Seiha didn't stop. Marriage between cousins, for example, is still common in some places. The point is, everyone here, except for Minami and Shion, now live in a space where technically there is no legal barrier. But just because something isn't illegal doesn't mean it's right. He felt even more unsettled. Relax, I'm just explaining the facts. I'm not saying I think this is acceptable. Actually, it gives me chills just thinking about it. But maybe Kotono felt that opening after our father's talk. Seiha stood up and walked to the door. Anyway, I'm glad you kept control. Am I still your older sister on paper or not? Then make sure to call me with a little more affection, okay? She said with a slight enigmatic smile. After she left, Arata could only collapse onto his bed, exhausted. The night had been far too long. He murmured to himself, I understood what she meant. Maybe any other guy in a house full of girls without blood ties would try to take advantage. But no, I've lived as their brother my whole life. Nothing's going to change overnight. The next morning, Arata woke up with his brain boiling. It had been too much to process in such a short time. Still groggy, he left his room for school and ran into Kotono and Banri in the hallway, acting strangely. And the day was only just beginning. The two were wearing something different than usual. Arata, curious, asked what that was. Banri explained naturally that the uniform of the new school had just arrived and she was just trying it on, while Kotono was wearing the spare. Then she teased a little. So, what do you think? Boys usually like this kind of look. Arata, trying to keep his composure, looked away and answered quickly. That's not something you should ask your brother, is it? Right after, he left the house with Shion on the way to school. During the walk, Shion commented that Banri was probably trying to lighten the mood after the bomb from the previous day. On the way, they overheard some boys saying they wanted to date any of Arata's sisters. They talked about their beauty and said they envied the brothers for living in the same house. Shion, half teasing, threw in, Ever thought about what would happen if they found out you're not really siblings? Arata quickly asked him to keep his voice down, but Shion continued, You're telling me they're okay with all this? I bet they're just as confused as we are. Despite the light tone, Arata was still processing everything. That wasn't something easy to get over overnight. He knew Shion didn't have the full picture of the situation, but he imagined the sisters were also shaken by their father's revelation. Minami suddenly appeared, which caught Arata's attention. After all, she was always in training, and that was the first time in years he had seen her free. He narrated mentally to himself that Minami was the fourth oldest, the most cheerful and carefree among the sisters. She was the type who could have fun in any situation, but at the same time was a 3-time champion of the tennis tournament and seen as a future Olympic athlete. The pressure on her must have been insane. Near the school, a group of girls ran up to Minami asking for autographs and wanting to take pictures with her. Arata, not understanding much, asked, "Who are these girls?" Minami explained that when she enrolled, she ended up taking her ID photo in the boys' uniform, and that sparked curiosity throughout the school, especially among other female students. Arata even felt a little jealous. He couldn't get any attention from anyone, while his younger sister became an idol without even trying. He asked if she was going straight home after class, since she had a rare free time. But Minami explained it wasn't exactly a break. She had done poorly on the placement test, and the coach had freed her from practice so she could study. Despite being a brilliant athlete, she was the one who struggled the most with grades among the siblings. With no other choice, Arata decided to help her study, and the chosen place was a karaoke. There, he sat beside her, focused on the mission. Observing her up close, he realized Minami really was beautiful, something he didn't always notice in everyday life. He gave her a math test to solve, but she got everything wrong. Arata then realized that there really weren't blood ties between them, which made him feel a bit uneasy about how natural that closeness was. But before the mood could get awkward, Minami ignored the studying, jumped up excitedly, and went to sing. She had queued up a song, one of those that make fun of people who get low grades. The choice was an inside joke between her and her friends. At that moment, Arata understood that even facing pressure and emotional confusion, Minami was able to enjoy life. She was perhaps the lightest and most fun person he could spend time with. On the way back from karaoke, the mood changed abruptly. Arata saw his childhood friend, the only girl he had truly loved, with another guy. The sight knocked the ground out from under him. Minami noticed her brother was shaken and started talking. "I'm still trying to digest everything that happened yesterday. It was way too much information." Arata asked what she thought about the fact that they weren't real siblings. She replied that she still didn't understand why their father had lied for so long, but now she wanted to find out who her biological parents were. She also said she was worried about Kotono for being the youngest and most sensitive of them all. Then, jokingly, Minami commented, "Look at that. Now you're not my older brother anymore, just an older guy at school." But then she added, "Jokes aside, for me what really counts are the bonds we built in these 15 years. That's what truly has value." That comment made Arata reflect. Minami always saw the bright side of things, and suddenly she looked directly at him. "And don't stay down like that, okay? I saw that the girl you like is already with someone else. I know how hard that is." Arata's eyes widened. "How do you know that?" "She told me herself," Minami replied, laughing. "Turns out I'm pretty good at getting information." Even so, she tried to cheer him up. "You're smart, funny, responsible. You just need to believe in yourself more. When we get home, let's play that fighting game." Later, Minami appeared in Uka's room carrying a cake box and some headphones she had found lost in the club room. She apologized for the previous fight, and the two finally made up. Then they went downstairs to eat together since there was too much food for just one. The next day, Arata was brushing his teeth, taking care of his hygiene carefully. When he left the bathroom, he ran into Kotono, who was acting as if nothing had happened in recent days. He found her behavior curious, as if she were completely ignoring the delicate episode. Then Seiha appeared and commented, "Teenagers are like that. But the way Kotono is now, she could end up becoming a really complicated mess in your life." Arata stayed silent. He knew that, even though everyone was trying to act normal, the storm was far from over. A short time later, they all went to an amusement park and had a lot of fun. After splitting up, Arata was alone with Banri, and they decided to get something to eat. Banri then asked Arata what he thought about the whole revelation of the adoption. Arata hesitated for a moment. There were things he had experienced with his sisters in the last few days that he preferred to keep to himself. In the end, he answered sincerely, "I'm worried about all this too. It's strange to think we're adopted, but even so, I don't want anything to change because to me you're still my sisters and always will be." Hearing that, Banri smiled emotionally and threw herself on him in a tight hug, saying he was really cute. She recalled how in the past he always came running to her whenever he felt bad. Arata replied with a shy smile, "But I've grown up now. That kind of thing doesn't suit me anymore." She laughed and said she worried about everyone because they were still in high school, a confusing stage full of changes. Then she confessed, revealing that since she found out she was the eldest of the Zundi family, she had made a promise to herself to protect the bond we had built, no matter what. Arata then realized something he had always known but never stopped to reflect on. Banri had always been there for him, always defended him from the others when things got tough. And that's why he spoke from the heart. "Of all of them, you're the most admirable." Already getting ready to leave, Banri stood up, but suddenly a little girl running with a cup in her hands came out of nowhere and almost bumped into her. To keep her from getting soaked, Arata reflexively stepped in front and ended up getting wet himself. Banri rushed to help him, trying to dry him off as best as she could, laughing at the situation. Arata, drenched, looked at her firmly and said, "This time I'm the one who's going to protect you because I'm your younger brother, right?" That sentence made Banri shine, realizing how much Arata had matured. Right after, the other sisters showed up and reunited with the two. Everyone was startled to see Arata wet, and he explained what had happened. With the group together, there was still time to enjoy the park a bit more, so they decided to head to the next attraction. On the way, Banri shyly asked if she could hold Arata's hand. He was left speechless, but before he could say anything, she had already intertwined her fingers with his. Later, already resting after many rides, Arata said he needed to go to the bathroom, and Shion decided to go with him. Kotono, upon hearing this, offered to go too, leaving the other sisters together. And it was precisely in their absence that Seiha took the floor and decided to tell what she knew. Calmly, she revealed to the sisters that she had seen Arata and Kotono in the bathroom that day, and that he had confirmed what happened. She also said that, according to Arata himself, it was just a moment of confusion, and that he tried to calm her down, like any older brother would. Uka, confused, asked how Seiha knew that Arata hadn't had any reaction besides concern. That's when Seiha replied very naturally that she had recreated a similar situation just to observe. She approached him, measured his reaction, and noticed that his heartbeat remained normal. The sisters were stunned. Banri widened her eyes in surprise. "Wait, you actually tested that?" Seiha confirmed, saying she believed it was important to understand the situation since they all lived together and were going through something delicate. She explained that it had been an impulsive act by Kotono, probably influenced by her age and the emotional confusion everyone was feeling after their father's revelation. The sisters began to discuss what they should do about it. Minami suggested that even so, it was important to lightly scold Kotono to help her understand her own feelings. Seiha then said that the best thing would be not to tell Kotono that they all already knew. According to her, that would only make Kotono panic. Banri agreed, saying that keeping Kotono's emotional balance was the most important thing. That's when Uka made a revelation. She told them that the episode when Arata was caught on top of her had in fact been caused by Kotono, and that he took all the blame even though he was innocent. The sisters were outraged. Seiha commented that now that Kotono knew she wasn't related by blood, that probably fueled even more of her impulsive behavior. Banri, however, asked for calm. She said that despite everything, what Kotono felt seemed to be the result of emotional confusion mixed with a possible true feeling. "She's in love," Banri said with a sigh. "And we were also shaken when we discovered we weren't blood siblings. Imagine her." The sisters agreed they needed to find a way to guide Kotono with care and empathy, without pressure, but also without ignoring what was happening. Soon after, the group that had gone to the bathroom returned, and everyone went together to the last attraction of the day, the haunted house of the park. As they walked there, Minami and Seiha were excitedly discussing who would be the first to win the park's themed stuffed animal. Arata, watching everything, thought to himself that Kotono had, for the most part, calmed down, and that relieved him. For the first time in days, he hadn't been put in a compromising situation by her. But he also knew that this calm came from internal confusion. That revelation that they were all adopted was still messing with everyone's minds. Even he took time to accept it. At first, he didn't want to believe it. But now, there at the park, with everyone laughing and having fun, things seemed to have gone back to normal. Arata reflected. Could it be that their father feared that the revelation would break the bonds they had built? Whatever the reason, hiding that for so many years certainly hadn't been easy. And even without fully understanding everything, he decided to forgive him. Inside, he promised that nothing would change, no matter what blood or paperwork said. With that thought, he decided to enjoy the rest of the night at the park alongside his siblings. Later, while passing by a stuffed animal shop, Arata once again saw the girl he loved and next to her, her boyfriend. His heart sank. He froze, staring from afar, until he was interrupted by Uka, who noticed the paleness on her brother's face and asked worriedly. The two moved a little away from the rest of the group. Uka spoke in a more serious tone. I have something important to tell you, Arata. We were raised believing we were twins. 16 years like that. There are many unresolved things between us that we now need to talk about. But Arata, touched, quickly replied, Don't say that. I still consider you my twin sister. That hasn't changed for me and never will. Uka was silent for a few seconds, then began speaking in a lighter tone. Remember how we always thought we had some kind of telepathy? We said it was because we shared the same womb. We always knew what the other was going to do. That day we played rock, paper, scissors 10 times in a row and tied every single one. Everyone said that was a twin thing. Arata smiled, remembering that, but what came next caught him by surprise. Arata, I like you. Those words came out of Uka's mouth almost in a whisper, but loaded with feeling. A few days later, our protagonist was back to his school routine, going about the day calmly. But then Shion came into the scene, clearly following the playbook of the problematic brother with twisted thoughts. He bluntly said, Have you ever stopped to think if at some point you stopped seeing your sisters as sisters and started seeing them as normal girls? Yes, he really said that. And the worst, he justified it by saying that now, knowing they weren't blood-related, technically they were just ordinary girls with whom he had a lot of intimacy. He even pointed out that Kotono had already said she liked him even before they knew they were adopted. But then Arata came in and immediately cut him off. He said that thought had never crossed his mind, that he couldn't forgive that kind of thinking, and that surely his brother didn't think that way either. He justified it by saying that Shion was already in a relationship, so he didn't need those ideas. Arata, a bit suspicious, asked since when Shion had been dating, still teasing him with that affectionate nickname talk. Shion proudly replied that there was always something going on between him and his girlfriend, that every day with her was an adventure. That made our protagonist even more curious, and of course, he started daydreaming, wishing he had someone too, which ended up feeding some twisted thoughts in his head. But then came the bomb. Shion said he had already told Uka everything about his thing with Kotono. Arata froze on the spot and went into panic mode, thinking she would never believe his innocence. But Shion tried to calm him down, saying he should trust his ex-twin, that she would never believe he had really done something wrong. That made Arata think that Uka was a true tsundere. She knew the truth, but even so, she kept picking on him. He even commented that, as he said the day before yesterday, they had been siblings for 16 years, and just because they discovered they were adopted, that didn't erase the bond they had built. But of course, Shion came back with that twisted thought and said that if the boys at school found out the real situation of the family, they would be filled with envy and want to beat Arata up, because he lived with 5 beautiful girls, the dream of any guy at school. Arata, of course, told him to shut up and not tell anyone. At that moment, he started remembering that specific night and thought that all this seemed more like the plot of a romantic comedy. Despite the confusion, he knew that Uka only wanted to make it clear that even though she kept picking on him, and now knowing they weren't blood siblings, she still felt proud to be his twin sister. She even mentioned that Shion had told her what happened between him and Kotono, and that she was proud of the way he handled it, like a true older brother. After all, Kotono was still young, so no one was at fault. And that's when Arata realized, in reality, Uka had just been praising him all along. That calmed his heart, because it reinforced that to her, they were only siblings, and she had never had any intention of falling in love with him. So he asked the question, "You're a tsundere, aren't you?" Which seemed true. But Uka got irritated, quickly changed the subject, said she was going to the bathroom, and walked away. Arata kept wondering about her strange behavior, and soon understood that she was afraid their relationship would change. That made him remember what Shion said, that he could date any of his sisters since they weren't really related, and then his mind short-circuited. Meanwhile, Uka went to the bathroom with a red face, remembering that, like it or not, she had ended up confessing to Arata, and that messed with her, especially because she remembered Seiha had already said that Kotono had been more direct, had confessed, and even clung to Arata. Uka felt that what she did was embarrassing. Back to the present, our protagonist was at the mansion's gym. He was lifting weights when Minami showed up and asked how he was. Arata, of course, teased her for working out even on a Sunday morning. She replied that it was part of the routine since she was an athlete, and even praised Arata, saying that even without being a professional, he had never missed a workout. He replied that he had been training since childhood, and felt bad when he skipped, but then revealed to us that he was actually buried in the gym because he had so much on his mind. Minami commented that maybe he was overtraining because of what their father used to say, that a true leader takes care of himself first. The two used to train together late at night. But Arata changed the subject and said she was the only one who kept that discipline every day. That's why she was so successful, and he admired her a lot. That made Minami blush, and she changed the subject too. Suddenly, she remembered that night at the amusement park when she was with her sisters buying stuffed animals. When she went out to look for Arata and Uka, she caught the scene of the confession. And now, right in front of the womanizer brother, she didn't even know what to say. She couldn't ask directly about what happened with Uka, so she shifted focus and started training again. But curiosity got the better of her, and she blurted out, "Did something happen between you and Uka?" Without imagining that she knew about the confession, Arata answered innocently. He said that despite their little fights, he and Uka got along really well. Minami pretended to swallow the answer, acted naturally, and left the room, but outside she was frustrated for not being able to really touch on the subject. After all, even if their relationship seemed the same, Uka had said she loved Arata. Later, Arata left his room thinking about taking that relaxing Sunday bath, but Minami's question still echoed in his mind. Why did she want to know that right now? He wondered if she had noticed any change in the atmosphere between him and Uka. Since the day their father revealed the truth about their family, Arata had been thoughtful, thinking Minami was acting strange because of the upcoming school tournaments. He really worried about her. But suddenly, his plan to relax in his sacred Sunday bath went down the drain, literally, when he entered the bathroom and found Seiha changing clothes. The door was wide open, and she had simply forgotten to close it. Arata freaked out, scolded her, saying she needed to stop doing that kind of absurd thing. But Seiha, as always, kept that cold and calculating manner. She continued undressing as if nothing was happening, and even dropped a philosophical quote. According to an author she had read, "Man is a being that gets used to everything." That's why Arata's shock, as he crouched in the corner of the bathroom, even surprised Seiha herself. She actually apologized, saying that if her body, which he had already seen 1,000 times, was bothering him, then she was sorry. Arata sighed in relief, glad the situation hadn't gotten even more embarrassing. He tried to leave quickly, but noticed a piece of women's clothing on the floor. He picked it up to put it in the basket, and at that moment, he remembered what Uka had once said, that his sister's bodies were part of the house's furniture. With that in mind, he forgave the mess. He found it a little strange that Seiha was bathing at that unusual hour for her, but then thought that she never cared about that kind of thing like kinship or blood ties. She was the type who wouldn't change for anyone. That's when he noticed their mother's ring on her finger and asked if it still fit. Seiha replied yes, but that it was a little loose. Even so, she said it was a very important keepsake of their mother. Arata commented that, although she was the second oldest, she probably didn't remember their mother as much as he did, but he was sure she carried a huge affection for her in her heart. After that, he said goodbye, saying he needed to take a shower to wash off the sweat and would go back to training afterwards. The next day, Arata was completely wrecked, lying in bed. He had seriously overdone his training, but like a magnet for trouble, Banri suddenly showed up in his room. And like all his sisters, she was also acting a little suspicious. She started chatting about the past, remembering when their father scolded him for leaving crumbs on the floor. Arata, already tired, asked straight up what she wanted. She replied that she just wanted to take a look at her teenage little brother's room and, with no ceremony, went snooping on his computer to see if she found anything suspicious. But she ended up reading something wrong and started mocking him while he got all nervous. Then, out of nowhere, she came close, leaned on him and said that at 17, it would be more worrying if he had nothing to hide. And as if casually, she invited her little brother on a date. The next day, there he was, on the so-called date with his older sister. She loved teasing him and took him downtown, the same place where he had already wanted to fix his phone for some time. But before the outing even began, she was already giving Arata her usual playful provocation. He, obviously uncomfortable, asked her not to do that anymore, reminding her they were siblings. But Banri laughed, saying she'd do that even in a next life, even if the two had become stars. They finally arrived at the phone store. His phone was a wreck, so he decided to get a new one. But then Banri, of course, didn't let it slide. She asked if he didn't have a preference. She explained that just like in love, preferences matter. Those who care about design care about appearance, and those who pay attention to functions value personality. She said you could learn a lot about someone that way, and that she was relieved to see his choices. At that moment, the clerk showed up with the new phone and said, "Couples get a discount on the plan." Arata, desperate, tried to explain that they weren't a couple, but Banri quickly clung to him and said yes, that they were going to sign the plan together. He, of course, couldn't deny it at the time, and they left the store while he tried to understand what on earth was happening with all the women in his life. On the way, Banri saw an ice cream shop and dragged Arata to have ice cream with her. While enjoying the moment, she suggested they take some for everyone, but Arata reminded her that the ice cream would melt. That made her remember their childhood when the two always fought over ice cream. Then she changed the subject and asked if something was bothering Arata because he seemed strange. He replied with the classic joke, "That's just my face, unfortunately." But he assured her everything was fine. Still, Banri said that if he needed anything, he could always count on her. After all, she was the oldest and worried about him. Meanwhile, Kotono was in her room, looking at the pictures from the day at the park, happy for having had so much fun. But upon receiving a photo of Arata with Banri eating ice cream, she felt a bad sensation as if she were losing him. Even so, she put the phone down and forced herself to get back to studying, trying not to listen to her own head. Banri and Arata had already finished their ice cream when she said she wanted to do something else. But suddenly she received a message and her expression changed. She said she had an appointment and had to leave. Arata asked why she didn't call someone else, like a boyfriend, to go out with her. But she deflected, saying he was too young to understand those things. She left and, on the way, texted Minami, telling her she couldn't get anything out of Arata about what happened at the park. Minami, who was in the bath, replied that she did hear Uka saying, "I love you, Arato," on that day, but she began to doubt what she heard. After all, an "I love you" between siblings is bizarre, even by anime standards. Even so, Minami decided to text Banri, saying that maybe she had misheard. But she made a classic mistake. She accidentally sent the message to the sisters' group chat. At that moment, Uka was about to take a bath. Minami tried to cover it up and quickly deleted the message, thinking no one had seen it. But out of nowhere, Kotono appeared with the phone in her hand, with an expression of pure shock, clearly having read what she shouldn't have.